Hello, welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where we have meddled with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beale. You know, that podcast. We're that one. My name is Josh Bradley. I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff Grizz-Ulrich.
Hello.
And Hugo Panay.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. You guys probably were expecting a different line for the intro, I imagine.
I'm on board with that one. That is one of my favorite moments in the movie.
Yeah, I was expecting something crazy, and I got it, so I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, there's a number of crazy, yelly lines that I could have chosen from Network, which is what we're talking about today. Network, the 1976 movie directed by Sidney Lumet, written by Pat Chayefsky. And we don't really have a main topic today. We're just going to, talk about Network. Network is both our main topic and our film to remember. Mostly because I'm extremely tired because the Oscars are tonight, and I've been working on YouTube videos for the last 2-3 weeks, so I'm cool with the shorter episode this week. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on board for that. But also, the original concept for the podcast was we were going to be talking about, more older films, and then we just got
films worth remembering.
Films worth remembering, and then we kind of went off on the rails and got really into talking about our favorite directors and stuff like that, which has been great. But it's nice to go back and talk about an old movie.
To the roots, yeah. See, will this be the second oldest movie we've talked about so far? No, third.
No,
because Godfather.
Godfather.
No, yeah, second.
No, second oldest. Oh my god.
Technically, we talked about The Godfather and Godfather Part 2. Yeah, we have Citizen Kane. We talked about The Godfather and Godfather Part 2, but technically our film to remember that week was Godfather Part 3.
Yes.
So,
as far as film to remembers go, yes.
Film to remembers, yes.
Films.
We pluralize
film
it.
to remembers.
Film to remembers. Yeah, you got to pluralize it correctly. Okay.
It's important.
It is. It's extremely, grammar and syntax is very important to stay consistent on. So let's go right into Network. Our boilerplate stuff. It was released November 27th, 1976. Budget $3.8 million. Box office $23.7 million. I noticed on the Wikipedia page they referred to this as one of the biggest hits of 1976, and I'm like, it made $24 million in the box office. Is that really the standard?
Is that accurate?
I don't know. Well,
maybe it's like one of the greatest hits in long-term views.
Well, we'll talk about that because yes, it is, but also there's a lot of good stuff in 76, and I'll mention that later. That'll come up. Like I said, written by Patty Chayefsky, directed by Sidney Lumet. I think that the legacy of this movie is its screenplay and Chayefsky's brilliant work, but I just want to shout out Sidney Lumet at some point, so let's shout him out here. I think Sidney Lumet makes great movies, and this is, among his best, but like the screenplay, the writing is a lot flashier than the directing in this, I think it's fair to say. Yeah,
I would agree with that.
Yes.
But Sidney Lumet, that's kind of his style. He's not very flashy. He's
not a flashy director.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean this to sound derogatory, but he's kind of a point-and-shoot kind of director, but in like a good way. Kind of a...
He's letting the narrative speak for the movie more than the photography.
For sure. And, one of your favorite movies, Grizz, is 12 Angry Men. I think you
similar
can say the same
sort
thing
of
about
deal.
that.
Absolutely.
I mean, the staging in 12 Angry Men is pretty smart, I'd say. But regardless, Sidney Lumet wrote a book called Making Movies, and it's just about, like, what a director does. I think that's something that not everyone really has a good grasp on. And if you want to read a book about filmmaking, you could do a lot worse than making movies. I really recommend it by Sidney Lumet, and I recommend all of his movies because he's just a workhorse. He made like 50 movies in 50 years, and he's had a long, successful career. So shout out to Sidney Lumet. Network was nominated for 10 Oscars at the 49th Academy Awards, so it is tied with Rocky for the most nominations of the night. And it won 4 of those 10 nominations for Actor, Actress, Supporting Actress, and Original Screenplay, which means it was tied with All the President's Men for the most wins of the evening. Interesting that, neither one of those won Best Picture, but they both won the most Oscars of the night. So,
yeah. And we're going to need to talk about some of these Oscars as well, because I have thoughts about those.
I looked up, I have the Wikipedia page for the 49th Academy Awards at the ready to discuss as needed. As I said, this Network lost Best Picture to Rocky. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think about it losing to Rocky for Best Picture?
I will never understand the cultural phenomenon that is Rocky. I'm sorry.
But you're Italian.
I think Rocky's okay. I do not get it at all. It's a great underdog story.
So you don't have Italian Stallion tattooed anywhere on your person?
I very much do not. No.
Okay.
I really love Rocky. I do. We've talked about how much I love sports movies, and Rocky is among the best in sports movies. And I also think Rocky gets a lot of credit for the way that the movie was made, in the sense that it was, it was written by Sylvester Stallone, and
there's a little bit of a meta narrative between his real life and Rocky's ascent, from humble roots.
And so I think that it gets a little bit of a boost culturally from that, whereas a lot of the other nominees that year are Hollywood movies, so.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I'm not personally, I would happily watch Rocky over Network basically every time. But that's not a negative about Network. It's just I think Rocky's the popular choice. It's like
crowd pleaser.
It's a crowd pleaser, and I'm part of that crowd.
It's interesting. It's interesting to look at like the reputations of Rocky and Network and All the President's Men in a modern setting, because I feel like Rocky is. I mean, they made 7 or 8 Rocky movies, depending on who you ask, so it's still pretty relevant in the popular culture, and you're hard-pressed to turn on cable and not find Rocky on some channel
somewhere
every weekend.
Yeah.
This is totally off topic, but I'm just curious. Hugo, what's the reputation of Rocky like in Italy? Does anybody in Italy care for it or know much about it?
I don't know. To be honest, it's not huge.
Okay.
I think it's kind of something that people who are older than me, like my stepdad is really into Rocky, the first one, but my generation certainly not very attached to it, and
sure.
And I think even with Creed, they're very American films. I'll say this. So if you're not really interested in that culture and wanting to understand it, it's not so easy to get into. I personally love Creed, for example, but
but you are also very invested in American culture, so
I am much more than the average Italian, for sure. Yeah.
And the West won the Cold War because of Rocky IV. So
yes, exactly.
Thank you for your service, Rocky IV. I have the outline here that of the Best Picture nominees in 1996, in these Best Picture nominees, you have Taxi Driver, All the President's Men, Network, and Rocky. And I just thought it'd be an interesting litmus test to ask someone what they think should have won of those 4 movies. And there's a 5th movie that I don't remember, so apologies to that 5th movie.
Bound for Glory, yeah.
Bound for Glory.
Never
something I've never heard of it.
So. Of those nominees, like I said, I'm not mad about Rocky winning because I do love Rocky, but I probably would have said Taxi Driver for Best Picture out of those.
I've seen 3 of these, and I would probably pick both Network and Taxi Driver over Rocky. Personally.
I think if you'd asked me at any point in the last 12 years, I probably would have said Taxi Driver, but maybe in my older age, I'm starting to feel more Network than Taxi Driver, but
we're all getting a little Howard Beale as we're getting older.
We are, yes. Speaking of Howard Beale, Peter Finch playing Howard Beale in Network. He won Best Actor, and he had died before the ceremony. I think before nominations even. So
correct.
He was the first posthumous Oscar winner for acting. A feat that was not again repeated until 32 years later with Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, and will likely be repeated tonight, maybe.
Very possible with Chadwick Boseman.
If you're listening to this in the future, we're recording this on Oscar Sunday for the 2021 Oscars, and Chadwick Boseman is the heavy favorite to win Best Actor tonight. But I don't know, Anthony Hopkins is creeping. He's making a run, so we'll see. Beatrice Straight, who plays Louise Schumacher, who's William Holden's wife in the movie, she set the record that I believe still stands for the least amount of screen time in an Oscar-winning performance. She's in 5 minutes and 2 seconds of this movie, and she won Best Supporting Actress.
Is this a good time for me to complain about this?
Go for it. Yeah, I was about to complain about it too.
Because okay, it was a good performance.
Sure.
But
yeah.
Should this have even been nominated for Best Supporting Actress?
So she's, I think I clocked her in 2 scenes total.
Yeah.
And the first scene was just her waking up and finding that Howard Beale is no longer sleeping on their couch like he was when they went to bed. And so that's basically a nothing scene. And then the second scene is more, emotional, but it's one scene. She's in one mode.
Yeah.
And I think that, William Holden gives more of a performance in that one scene than Beatrice Straight does, no disrespect. But yeah, I mean, I looked at the other nominees, and I've actually seen a few of the nominated performances because there was Jodie Foster in Taxi Driver and Piper Laurie for playing Carrie's mom in the movie Carrie, and I would pick both of those. I'd pick both of those over Beatrice Straight. Again, no disrespect, but
she was.
And I don't know a lot about
Carrie's
Beatrice
mom,
Straight.
she's so creepy.
I don't know a lot about Beatrice Straight. Did she have a pretty significant career? Do we know? Was this maybe a lifetime achievement sort of Oscar?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying she didn't have a great career. Just because I don't know much about her doesn't mean she didn't. But like, I know of her because of this win,
Sure,
and because of the novelty of the 5 minutes on screen winning an Oscar.
Because like this is what we were talking about last week when we were making our predictions. Is that I get really hung up on movies being nominated, or movies or performances being nominated in categories that they should not be nominated in. And while this is a supporting role, it's it's not a substantial supporting role.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's the best female supporting role in the film, to be completely honest. So, I don't know.
It looks like Beatrice Straight was in 15 movies total.
Yeah.
And I think this was her only Oscar nomination.
So probably
and
not even a Lifetime Achievement
for you.
Oscar.
Yeah.
The only one I actually remembered her for was Poltergeist. She plays the I think, no, maybe not a grandma. I can't remember.
I'm getting really hung up on
I
how
remember
little
this.
respect Taxi Driver got in this Oscar.
Yeah. Well, again, like Beatrice Straight is in one scene, so she kind of has to hit one, maybe two emotions total in her performance. And like Jodie Foster, she's only in like 5 or 6 scenes in Taxi Driver, but like she's got a wider spectrum of things to convey for sure than Beatrice Straight does. And I mean, it's been nearly 2 decades since I've seen Carrie, but I mean, her mom's performance left an impression on me for sure. So I don't know.
But yeah, and it's not just this one category. Like I also am hung up with Network receiving 2 Best Actor nominations. When
I have that, I want to talk about that later.
Okay, we'll talk about that more later. That's fine. Yeah. And then I also have a problem with Ned Beatty, who has an excellent performance again for Best Supporting Actor, getting a nomination there. But again, I like, is he the best supporting actor in this movie, or Robert Duvall, maybe?
I mean, I would pick Duvall over Ned Beatty, but he's got a big speech, and I guess the Oscars this year were big on big speeches, which might be how Peter Finch won. Which again, we'll talk about that later. I mean, they also nominated this year. They nominated Burt Young in Rocky as Paulie. So
yeah, Rocky got 2 Best Supporting Actor nominations.
As
in this
did
year.
this, right? Or did this only get the one?
Only got the one Best
one.
Supporting Actor. That's why I'm hung up on Robert Duvall not being in there.
This is Network. American Film Institute made a list in 1998 of the 100 best American movies ever made, and then they made a second list in 2007 of the 100 best American movies ever made. And I think it's a pretty well regarded list. As well regarded as any list of best movies is. I think if you looked at the list, probably 80 of them are probably must-sees, I would say. So, good list. And on that list, in the 97 version, Network ranked number 66 out of 100. And then in the 2007 re-release list, it ranked number 64. So it jumped up a whole 2 spots in the AFI Top 100. And I just want to note that the Best Picture nominees from 1976, 4 of them appear on the Top 100 for AFI. Taxi Driver at 52, Rocky 57, All the President's Men at 77, and then again Network at 64. And I was just kind of paging through the AFI Top 100, and 1976 is one of only 3 years where there are 4 movies from that year on the list, and the others were 1982 and 1969. You guys want to guess what movies from 1982 are on the AFI Top 100?
I could not even if I wanted to.
Blade Runner.
Blade Runner is one of them. Yes.
Okay. E.T.
E.T. is one of them. Yes, very good.
1982. Now I'm getting very confused, and I think that's the 2 that I have, because
the others are Tootsie,
Tootsie,
and Sophie's Choice.
And Sophie's Choice.
How about 1969? What 4 movies from 1969 are on the top 100?
I have absolutely no idea.
Yeah, I don't think you guys. Midnight Cowboy.
Midnight Cowboy.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Oh, fantastic!
I would have known. Easy Rider.
Easy Rider, very good.
Yes.
And then the 4th one.
No idea.
The Wild Bunch.
The Wild Bunch.
Same I always struggle with remembering the years movies were released. So
yeah, I used to be really good at it, and I'm still kind of good at it, but I don't know. I think I'm waning.
You want to know why I knew about Butch and Sundance Kid and Easy Rider?
Why?
Being released in 1969, because I was like, oh, Tarantino, before he released Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is set in 1969, he released a list. Oh, these are the 15 movies that I was inspired by. and I watched all of those, and I remember those two being in 1969 for that reason.
Thank you, Quentin Tarantino.
Thank you, Quentin, for your film history. So Networks, I mentioned kind of earlier, is that screenplay is regarded as one of the best ever written. Like I said, the movie itself is ranked number 64 in the AFI Top 100, but the screenplay is ranked number 8 on the Writers Guild of America's 101 best American screenplays ever written. Number 8 behind, in ascending order, Sunset Boulevard, Annie Hall, All About Eve, Citizen Kane, Chinatown, The Godfather, and Casablanca. That's 8 bangers right there.
Yeah.
You're in good company if you're in that list.
Yeah. Yeah. And Paddy Chayefsky wrote the screenplay in the midst of the Watergate investigation and the Vietnam War in the mid-70s. And, so you can see how the anger and frustration of the times kind of trickled into the screenplay, because there is a lot of anger and frustration in the movie. The iconic line, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore," is listed at number 19 on AFI's Top 100 movie quotes, and is still probably like the number one legacy of this movie is
that line.
Peter Finch yelling that line. So that's what I thought. I thought about doing that for the intro, but that seemed a little too pat, so I went with Ned Beatty's Primal
speech.
Forces of Nature line instead. Yeah. This was allegedly... The movie was allegedly not inspired by Christine Chubbuck. Do you guys know who Christine Chubbuck is?
I'm going to assume it was some sort of television producer.
Hugo, any idea who Christine Chubbuck is?
Some television personality who went crazy.
She was a newscaster who is going to get really dark, so brace yourselves.
Oh, okay.
She was a newscaster who killed herself live on TV in 1974.
Oh, okay.
So the thing that Howard Beale threatens to do in the first 10 minutes of this movie actually happened 2 years before the movie came out. And there was a movie called Christine in 2016 starring Rebecca Hall about Christine Chubbuck. It was on my list to see, and I just never saw it. Honestly, I kind of have been putting it off because it seems like a pretty dour
sounds like a downer.
movie. Yeah.
Also, I mean, you know how it ends.
That's true. I do know how it ends, but Dave Iskoff, he wrote a book about like the making of Network, and he had access to Paddy Chayefsky's like notes that he was taking during the years of the writing process, like his journal basically. And according to Paddy Chayefsky's journal, there's no entry about Christine Lubbock the day that she did what she did in July of '74. However, apparently an early draft of the script, at one point, Howard Beale said, quote, that he will blow his brains out right on the air like that girl in Florida. And Christine Chubbuck, that took place in Sarasota, Florida, so that was a reference to Christine Chubbuck there, but that line was later cut. And Sidney Lumet was adamant that they didn't base this movie on her by any means, just possibly just a dark coincidence, And I kind of buy that, because I think that, the fact that she did that almost like ruins the satire to an extent, because then it just feels like a reference to her when it's actually, you would think like a attempt at heavy satire to have someone threaten that and then have the movie end the way that it ends, which I won't.
And also,
talk about
it would be hard for me to make the leap to believe that it was based on her. I mean, I don't know anything about her story, but did she claim to be a prophet or anything? So then I mean, yeah, the parallels kind of stop after the first 10 minutes of Network. That's kind of like get up to there, and then it kind of goes a much different direction after that. So yeah, let's talk about the plot, but try to keep it spoiler free best we can. Howard Beale, played by Peter Finch, is a news anchor for a fictional network called UBS, and this was the 70s, so there's only like 4 networks on TV. And he's the nightly news anchor, and he at the start of the movie he finds out he's getting fired because of low ratings, so he goes on the air that night to announces his retirement, quote unquote, and says that he's going to blow his brains out on the air in 1 week's time. And so they pull him off the air, obviously, for that, and make him go back on and apologize. And instead of apologizing, he just goes on another kind of rant, yeah. And then because of that rant, he becomes a ratings hit. So they continue putting him on the air and actually revamp his show to give him more space to rant and rave. And I think that plot summary kind of makes Howard Beale a bigger character than he actually is in the movie. He's actually not that big of a character, but the major players are Max Schumacher, who's played by William Holden. He's the head of the UBS news division.
Diana Christensen is played by Faye Dunaway. She's the head of UBS programming, so like the entertainment division. Frank Hackett is played by Rob Duvall. He just runs UBS. He like the network
Correct.
head.
Network head.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's also a bit of a corporate stooge for CCA. A part of the plot of the movie is that UBS was recently bought by a conglomerate, CCA, and I think that the news network's in the hands of huge corporations that aren't in the news business as part of the commentary of the movie.
Yeah.
And then Arthur Jensen, played by Ned Beatty, is in only a couple scenes, but he is the CCA chairman. So you got, and it's kind of, the movie's kind of just those three people: Diana Christensen, played by Faye Dunaway, Max Schumacher, played by William Holden, and Frank Hackett, played by Robert Duvall. Those three kind of fighting over Howard Beale and what to do with him, more or less. Is that fair to say, you think?
I would say their dynamic is the main character dynamic in the film. Yeah.
Yes.
It's Howard's almost a prop.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I have in the outline he's more of a tool than a character. So yeah, we can talk about him later. So yeah, the movie is basically about the profitization of television and the soulless opportunism that results from it. Because again, Howard has a mental breakdown on the air effectively, and they keep putting him on the air because he gets good ratings.
Yep.
Yeah, so the mechanics of how this works is after Howard says he's going to blow his brains out, he's fired. But then Frank Hackett, Robert Duvall, like kind of embarrasses Max Schumacher in front of the shareholders by announcing that they're going to like restructure his news organization because they lose money every year, which is again a very like corporatist position. Like the news is kind of supposed to lose money because you're not supposed to make profit off the news. It's supposed to be a service. But Frank Hackett sees it differently. He thinks every part of the corporation should make money, which is again part of the commentary of the movie. So after Max is kind of embarrassed by Frank Hackett from the shareholders, he kind of goes rogue a little bit. And so he's in the control room when Howard goes on the air and goes on a second rant and starts ranting about the bullshit on the air. And instead of pulling him off the air because Max Schumacher is throwing a little hissy fit about being embarrassed for the shareholders, he lets Howard go and just keeps him on the air. And because of that, it becomes a hit.
Whoops.
So it's kind of maybe a bit of a monkey's paw situation for Max Schumacher.
And then Faye Dunaway's character notices, because he's in charge of programming, and she notices, actually, she sees it more from someone who's in charge of programming in the sense that she's looking at how something might get ratings or not get ratings, regardless of whether it's good news or not.
Exactly, yeah.
And so she sees it, and she's like, if I'm in charge of that, I'm going to make it the biggest show on television.
And she's looking for an opportunity looking for an opportunity to increase her role with the network, and she sees Howard Beale as the golden ticket,
Soulless opportunism. Yes.
Yep.
And then that's a good point, Hugo. Again, Diana Christensen runs the entertainment sector of the division, and Max Schumacher runs the news sector of the division, and the two meld. The entertainment section begins to take over the news show and starts producing the news show, which is, I'll say the third or fourth time now, kind of the part of the commentary of the movie and the modern day relevance. Before we get to the modern day relevance, though, just real quick, what did you guys think of Network? Like, in general, Chris, what do you think of Network?
So, I have mixed feelings on this, because I think narratively it's fantastic, and it deserves its place on, the best screenplays list. But as we kind of talked about, the movie itself is not shot in a particularly brilliant manner. It's very, like you said, point and shoot. And so the actual visuals of the movie, to me, are somewhat boring. And even... And this could be a function of it being dated, like, that I'm coming into it so far in the future. And I've seen this once before as well, but, I didn't see it in 1976 when the visuals of Howard Beale's show were probably like the cutting edge film, stuff for making those sort of shows. But all the visuals look very dull to me, and I don't know. So
Sidney Lumet, I mentioned his book, Making Movies. If you read that, you kind of get the sense that he sees being a director as just very much a 9-to-5 job, And like, I think that kind of comes across in his style, the way he shoots stuff. He shows up, gets his shots, goes home, and has dinner with his wife, like that kind of thing. And like, I think that kind of comes across in the way this is shot too. It's just a very business-like and not very flashy. It's just kind of like, all right, here it is.
So when you combine my issues with the actual movie, like what I'm watching, combine that with the personal issues I have with the story, because like it is upsetting in a lot of ways, it makes it less fun. But again, that doesn't take away from the quality of the script, because I do think that's supposed to be kind of one of the points that's being driven home. So overall, I don't super enjoy Network. It's good. And if we weren't having this conversation, I probably wouldn't have ever watched it again. So, I mean, thank you for, suggesting
You're welcome.
it.
You're welcome for bestowing Network upon you. Hugo, where are you at on Network?
I loved it. I'm a big fan of satire, specifically when it's political satire and social commentary, and how does the commercialization of everything and the big corporate overlords that control everything change the real world. And I actually think Sidney Lumet's style in this works really well in contrast with that, because the style is so naturalistic,
cold almost. Yeah,
naturalistic, distant. He's very much the ultimate gritty 70s director. He's like pointing the camera at something, the action happens, the camera follows it. There's nothing very flashy about it. Mm-hmm. So it looks so straight, but what is happening on screen is so almost farcical for me that I think that contrast works fantastically for me. And I really enjoyed it as a satire most of all. I thought it did feel like it dragged a little bit when it went into the more personal side, because I felt that like the personal relationships were a little melodramatic sometimes and didn't really fit the overall theme of the film. But other than that, I thought it was great.
So that was one of the other big problems I have with the movie, is it almost feels like two different movies. The movie about the television show and the movie about Max Schumacher's, love interests and all that. And I felt like it's a little, it got a little soap opera-y for those sort of scenes with Max Schumacher and his wife, or Max Schumacher and Diana.
Let's talk about, contextualize what we're talking about. So Diana, the head of the new division, and Max, head of the Diana, the head of the entertainment division, and Max, the head of the news division, begin having an affair. And we mentioned Beatrice Straight is only in one scene. Her one scene is when Max confesses to her that he's having an affair, and she just reacts to him having an affair, and she won an Oscar for that reaction, I guess. But I mean, I think that's fitting with the message of the movie, because, it's a little bit of an on-the-nose metaphor. Entertainment is in bed with news. They're having a immoral affair, and to the detriment of everyone involved, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And maybe that's something I need to think about, like, for myself when I'm watching these sort of movies, is how much I let how on-the-nose something is bother me. I like subtext, and when the subtext rises to the surface too far, I start to be like, okay, guys, I mean, we could have been a little more creative here.
Yeah. I for me, it's just that the melodrama of his personal relationships goes on a little too long. Like, I think it fits into the film quite well, because I think his character is the only character that you can attach yourself to, because he's the only one that's making any sense throughout this story. Like, all of the other characters, like Faye Dunaway, she only talks about ratings ever. Yeah. She never talks about anything else.
He's certainly the audience point of view character for sure. Yeah.
Frank Hackett, he only talks about the corporation is supposed to make money. Obviously the protagonist of the film, as the film is framed, at least initially, is essentially a lunatic throughout it, and there's no attachment that you can have to him. And he's the only one that seems to be grounded in reality and realizing how crazy all of this is. And so I think it's important to show how he interacts with the other characters, and how in the relationship she's completely detached from the real world. She's just so focused on her work and what she's trying to do that. So I think it fits. I just think it goes on a little too long. It's a little too melodramatic.
If you don't mind, Josh, I just wanted to touch on one more thing with William Holden's character here. He's, like Hugo said, supposed to be the character that the audience can relate to, and so I have a slight issue with the decision to make him make decisions that I don't think the audience would make if they were in the same shoes.
Like which decisions?
Well, so like cheating on his wife. I mean, I know that the whole the metaphor of being in bed with the news and all that notwithstanding, I'm supposed to relate to this character and view him as the person that you want to win, right? You want him to succeed in whatever. At least that's how I thought it was at the start of the movie, but it's not that. He becomes sort of a passive observer to so much of it, and maybe that's another metaphor that we are just watching all this stuff happen and not doing anything about it. But for me, that was frustrating, and I wanted him to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting though. I would maybe I need to reflect more on like why he decides to begin that affair with Faye Dunaway, because it is his decision for the most part. Like she kind of softly comes on to him. Like,
she offers.
Yeah, but then he talk about a movie about soulless opportunism. He takes that opportunity and runs with it. Also, when she does like softly come on to him, she mentions that she was a journalism or studying speech at the University of Missouri. when he came and gave a talk there. And shout out to Mizzou, great school.
Like one of the top journalism schools in the world.
Yeah, my brother went there. My 3 cousins went there. My uncles went there. So shout out to Mizzou and shout out to Diana Christensen. Go Tigers.
I think his character is as flawed as everyone else, but I don't mean that you attach yourself to him emotionally necessarily. I just think he's the only one that is making any sense. Everyone else is so over the top and so...
Which is why it was frustrating when he makes decisions
satirical.
that don't make sense to me.
Well, but I mean, cheating doesn't have to be irrational.
A lot of people cheat.
Sometimes relationships just kind of fizzle out and shit happens. And it's the 70s.
Sure.
Just saying. So the trope of the wife is at home and the hotshot exec at the TV company has an affair is also kind of something that you would see there.
Not to lean too hard into the metaphor that I mentioned earlier about news being better than entertainment, but there is something maybe to be said about that she runs the entertainment division. It's big and shiny, and you want to watch it even if it's bad for you. So like you can kind of apply all those things to Diana Christensen herself. She's shiny, and you want to get in bed with her even though it's bad for you, and it is bad for him, but he does it anyway. That kind of stuff. And
he knows it's bad, like from the start,
of course. Yeah. And I don't know if this is the place to talk about it, but Diana Christensen, she does have a lot of wild ideas about how to get good ratings. She, puts in the Ecumenical Liberation Army,
Should we have the spoiler warning
group. Up? No, this is all in the first 15 minutes. Yeah. I mean, we'll talk more about the Ecumenical Liberation Army, but in the spoiler section. But yeah, she gets in bed, metaphorically speaking, with communist terrorists,
a domestic terrorist group.
Yeah, and puts them on the air, gives them a show because I guess people like that kind of stuff. Which Hugo, you mentioned in talking about what you like about the movie, you like that it's a satire.
Yep.
And so I guess I'll jump to that section of the outline. This is a satire, a pitch black comedy. Do you find this movie funny, Hugo? Do you find this funny?
Several times I thought it was hilarious. I think that because of what I said before, because of how straight everything is played, except for the over-the-top performances, and because of just the sheer ridiculousness of many of the situations in the film. So, for example, a scene that kind of that really surprised me and that I really laughed at is the first time that Faye Dunaway's character meets the sort of black woman who's a member of the Communist Party. Just their first interaction we can't say the lines obviously for obvious reasons, but I thought was absolutely hilarious. And I think it sets up this dynamic where throughout the whole movie, even the revolutionaries are kind of still part of the whole corporate structure and trying to make money, really. So
of course,
it adds to the whole farce of it, and I think. The ending, when we get to the ending, the way it's treated is very, very satirical, very jarring to some. Like, it doesn't seem realistic in any way, but it to me, it was quite funny because it is a satire. It is a deep cutting critique, but it does it in a way that was quite funny for me. I really enjoyed it as a satirical comedy thing.
Yeah, the moments. I mean, I kind of darkly laugh at a few things.
Exactly.
I'm not sure I would call it like ha 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 funny, but
no.
I did flag a few moments. They're mostly in keeping with your point, which is that there's a contrast between the content you're seeing and the way the content is presented.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the ending scene, which we can talk about in a little bit, but I think Sidney Lumet's very naturalistic style and kind of cold, detached style really highlights the contrast in the ending scene. When Howard first says, "I'm going to blow my brains out on the air," we're in the control room as he says that, and like no one notices he says it. Like he says, "I want to blow my brains out on the air," and the next thing you hear is a woman saying 10 seconds to commercial, and like that was really funny to me.
Yes, I laughed at that.
Yes, as you said, Hugo, there's a scene where communist domestic terrorists, the ELA, is sitting around talking about subsidiary rights on their show, and someone shoots a gun into the ceiling to like get people to shut up so they can talk about subsidiary rights.
Yeah,
which is just again a heavy contrast that's very amusing, particularly given the communist versus capitalist conversation happening there. Yeah. And also like when Diana takes over Howard Beale's show and makes it like this entertainment show, he ends a lot of his rants just by passing out.
Yes,
and then the camera just like pushes in on him passed out, and the audience just starts
the music, bum bum bum.
Yes.
Yay! I laughed. Yeah. The first time he fell, I guffawed. Like,
well, they do a good job of setting it up because Howard is in Max Schumacher's office. Howard and Max Schumacher are old friends, decades long friends, and Howard kind of goes on a mini rant in Max's office and then works himself up and then faints. And like when he faints in Max's office, Max like runs to his aid, checks on him, makes sure he's okay, gets him what he needs. And then when he faints a second time on the air, the camera just pushes in, the theme music plays, and the audience applauds.
No one goes to help.
The theme music really got me though.
Yes. and that happens. That's how every episode ends going forward.
I guess.
Howard passing out.
And
except for the last episode.
But we'll talk about that later.
And on that note, another thing that I found funny every time was any scene that the Jensen was in, which is Ned Beatty.
Ned Beatty.
You pronounce it? Mm-hmm. Ned Beatty's character was in, I thought was hilarious. Like, the first time he's in it, I think you have a scene before with Frank that's saying, "Oh, I'm going to be at the meeting of the shareholders next year. I'm going to say these words," and they're going to say, and Jensen is going to sit there and say, "Good job, Frank. Keep it up." And then we get to that scene, and he says the thing, and then Jensen is sitting there and he says, "Good job, Frank. Keep it up." I thought that was hilarious. And then his meeting with, what's he called? That
Howard.
Name. Howard again later in the film is, to me, that's the funniest
muddled scene. With the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beale.
Which is very over the top. Yeah. And at the same time, that idea of the primal force of nature is a metaphor for, the invisible hand of the market that's going to fix everything.
That is my favorite scene in the movie, is Ned Beatty's speech, because I just love, like, that they come into that scene and Ned's walking with Howard and says, "So they tell me you're a bit crazy," or whatever the line is. And
then he matches that.
And so then he matches that craziness. It's like, okay, if I'm talking to a crazy person, I got to talk like a crazy person.
Yeah, he gives this. I have this later on. This isn't really spoilers. We can talk about this. Ned Beatty, as the chairman of CCA, has to give Howard a talking to after some of the things he's talked about on his show. And he gives him his talk to in this fire and brimstone kind of speech. Like you guys said, he's kind of matching Howard's energy and matching his vibe. And I kind of want to talk later in the spoiler section about why he would do that. But can we put a pin in that?
Yeah, we'll put a pin in that because I definitely want to talk. Okay. Like I said, my favorite scene in the movie, so I want to talk more about that.
I think that scene is actually staged pretty artfully. That's not just a point and shoot scene. The way they keep him at the other end of the table. And probably one of the more indelible images in Network is the image of Ned Beatty from across the room with those green lamps lighting the table and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I skipped this section of the outline and talk about the satire. Grizz, anything about the satire? Anything about finding this movie funny?
Oh, like I said, there are several moments that I laughed. I laughed out loud at some things, and so in that sense, that's one of the things I do like best about the movie. Is it is very darkly funny, and especially with some of the subject matter being as dramatic as it is, being able to work in that dark humor is part of what makes the screenplay so great.
Yes,
that is the humor and the satire is definitely my favorite part of this movie.
And I think the other thing that makes the screenplay great, and part of the reason it has the reputation it has, is because people see it as a very prescient movie and predicting a lot of things about how the media world works nowadays. I pulled this quote from Aaron Sorkin. Sorkin said that, quote, "No predictor of the future, not even Orwell, has ever been as right as Chayefsky was when he wrote Network." So, this movie's 45 years old, but, again, it has a reputation of kind of predicting a lot of stuff. I wanted to ask you guys, like, what do you see in the current media landscape that this movie kind of predicted 45 years ago?
Well, I'm forgetting his name right now, but Howard Beale 100% is the InfoWars guy.
Alex Jones?
Alex Jones. I mean, it's like, I
don't
feel
know
like
if I'd go that far.
I mean, okay.
Not necessarily.
I mean, in the sense that Alex Jones is a crazy person who believes he's a prophet.
That's fair. Okay, so in his demeanor,
yeah, and the bombastic,
I don't remember
way
Howard
he speaks.
Beale. I don't remember Howard Beale talking about frogs turning you gay, or no, the water supply turning the frogs gay. That's it.
No,
yeah.
I mean you're right. Howard Beale, while being a crazy person, says some pretty poignant things. I'm not going to give Alex Jones credit for any of that, but I just mean like I think that people like Alex Jones or Bill O'Reilly or some of these big news personalities. I feel like they watch Network and they're like, "Oh, I can do that."
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's what I'll base my life on.
And so then they are a little like we said earlier, fire and brimstone. Sometimes they're, they talk about things in grandiose levels and theatrically.
Yeah,
and
trying to hold people's attention.
It also just in general anticipated a lot of the concept or the modern concept of infotainment, which is the melding of entertainment and information.
That's what I put. Yeah,
where the news become not as you said before, Josh, not a service, but they also have to make money. They also have to be entertaining, so the masses tune in, pay for it, watch the ads, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah,
and it's almost like a bluept for the 24-hour news network.
Yep. I think that's kind of hitting on the head right there. I think that's what this movie predicted more than anything else. The 24-hour news network, and again, like you said, Hugo, the ad buys and keeping people's attention as much as they can, and holding people's attention is more important than giving them information, and that's kind of the unholy matrimony of news and entertainment. And the way that Frank Hackett says is so aghast that the news division runs at a $30 million deficit every year, and that it should be making money and should be held accountable to the corporate standards like every other part of the corporation. And that's probably not great, and probably kind of got us to where we are today.
Yeah.
It also just in general, I think, predicts a lot of the evolution of television and mass media overall, where the news cycle is so fast, and even the entertainment side has to cater to like the lowest common denominator, and it all that matters is the rating. And so I think it is predicting the way mass media operates to a T right now, in regardless of whether it's news, whether it's entertainment, whether it's a streaming service or whatever it is.
I also think there's a certain degree of prescience about Howard telling people to get angry. Yes. And I feel like that is what a lot of news media is today, no matter which branch of the political spectrum you're looking at, there's a network that wants you to get angry about something. And they're going to tell you, like, here's what it is, and here's why you should be angry, and then you should go out and be angry. And then they do. We can see it all over our social media. There's lots of people who are watching things on television, and that's telling them to be angry, and then they tell all their friends, I'm angry, and this is why. And very prescient in that regard. And I think that's another reason why this movie is a little upsetting to me, because it's like, man, 1976, we knew this was going to happen, and we did nothing to stop it.
I think what we're kind of also the story beneath this story is the corporatization of everything, basically, not just television and news, but everything, and profits over truth, profits over morals, etc. Just the power of the dollar, and Ned Beatty's speech about there being no nations or peoples, just corporations and money. But I'm not sure that's prescient so much as like that's the state of the world in 1976, and they're just like saying the state of the world, and then that's just gotten worse in the last 45 years. So, I mean, I guess you call it prescient, but
I wouldn't even say it's prescient. It's just the way that it was back then, and
now it's still like that, and it still sucks. Yeah,
so, yeah. But yeah, in terms of that television element, another thing that I wanted to talk about is I think there's some veiled criticism of TV, even on the entertainment side, in the sense that I think Sidney Lumet is a director from, some could say the golden age of cinema, like the 50s to the 70s, is a period where cinema was the highest form of entertainment at the time, and in which cinema was also very much art. And I think this is both in a moment where television is becoming a threat to cinema, which could be prescient as well if you think about the streaming wars right now and how streaming could be potentially a threat to cinema today. So it's a threat to cinema, and at the same time, you're also in a very specific period for cinema itself, where cinema is becoming more commercialized. The film was released in 1976, so it's a year after Jaws and a year before Star Wars. So this is the moment where the huge commercialization of cinema is happening, and I think there is an element of even him as a filmmaker seeing just the entertainment world going in a direction that he doesn't necessarily agree with. And see, it's framed around television, but I think you can kind of extrapolate a wider idea of the over commercialization of everything that is going on in that time specifically.
Yeah, and I think you could, we already talked about Diana Christensen and what she's willing to put on the air, and what responsibility do people who program these things have? It is just anything that makes money can go on the air, or do you have any kind of again, like, moral responsibility to only put certain things in the air, and not communist domestic terrorists, for example, not put them on the air? Yeah.
Where's the line?
Yes. I want to talk about Peter Fitch's performance, if that's cool. Again, for the Oscar, he won posthumously, and he beat out Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver, Sylvester Stallone in Rocky, and his co-star William Holden as Max Schumacher. What do you guys think about that Oscar win?
It's odd. I think it's one of those. It's one of those. Why is Lakeith Stanfield in this category in the first place? Why is he a lead actor in this? I don't know.
He's not the lead actor.
I think he's the protagonist at the beginning, but then the whole movie is essentially framed around the other three main characters, and he's kind of always in the background.
Yeah, it's how the other characters use him is what the movie is about. So he's a supporting actor. I mean, this...
Agreed. Completely agree. Yeah.
Looks like the textbook definition of a supporting actor.
Well, he just gets to give the big speeches, and like the legacy of the movie is kind of his speeches. He gives, I don't know, 4 or 5 big speeches. That's kind of all he does.
Yeah.
Like, there's 4 or 5 big speeches, then there's maybe 2 or 3 scenes of him having conversations with Max Schumacher. That's all he's in the movie.
And they're great. They're great scenes. And it is an excellent performance. And had he been in Best Supporting Actor, I would have been fine with him winning that. But as Best Actor, certainly in comparison to Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver, or Sylvester Stallone as Rocky, where like they embody those characters so brilliantly.
I mean, but like you guys said, the movie does begin and end with Howard. The first line of narration is, this is a story about Howard Beale, who is a network news anchor on UBS TV. So, like, is it really a story to Howard Beale? Not really, arguably. He's not in it much. Like you guys said, he kind of shows up, goes away, shows up again to give a speech, then goes away again. It's mostly the other 3 characters.
If the narration had said, this is the story of how television destroyed Howard Beale, I think that would, make more sense to me. Because at the start of the movie, he's just a news anchor. and a pretty well respected one who's in the industry. He's not getting the ratings he used to, but and then here's how we absolutely ruin this man.
Yeah. I mean, I think William Holden is arguably a lead actor in this, and he was nominated and lost to his co-star. But yeah, to not honestly, De Niro or Stallone should have won this personally. Yeah. I mean, it's cool that they gave a posthumous Oscar, but that would happen again, and it will probably happen again tonight. So I don't know. Mm-hmm. Also, like, I'm also just like really uncomfortable with his performance. Like, he's so clearly mentally unhinged and unwell, and is in need of medical attention of some sort, and he doesn't get it. So like anytime he's like on screen, I'm like nervous. Yeah. And like particularly the ones where he's not on TV. If they have him on TV, then like okay, fine, let him rant. He's in his happy place, he's in the zone. But like when he's in like smaller conversations, like in meeting rooms with Max, like I just get nervous. Like what's he gonna do? He's so volatile, and like I don't know, makes me deeply uncomfortable.
I completely agree, and maybe that's part of the power of the performance, but yeah. It is also like. It's one of those moments where I kind of get hung up on people not reacting to things the way people would react to things. And at some point, even if you want to keep using him on the television show, you're going to put a body man on Howard Beale to make sure that he doesn't hurt himself or someone else.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines in the movie that I forgot about until I watched it this week is, so the I'm mad as hell, we're not going to take this anymore speech he gives, Howard had been missing for most of the day, and then he like shows up to the news station in the middle of the broadcast in pajamas and like a trench coat with his hair mussed from the rain, and they put him on the air. But when he walks into the news studio, again, in pajamas and an overcoat, the doorman's like, "Hello, Mr. Beale," and he just says, "I must make my witness." Sure thing, Mr. Beale. I almost made our intro, "I must make my witness," but I felt that was too obscure of a line. But just, what a great line.
Another great comedic beat, by the way.
Yes,
I think
for sure.
What's great about the comedy in the film, that they're never really necessarily going for jokes. It's just the absurdity of the situation that makes it funny.
Yes. I mean, while we're talking about it, do you guys got anything on the performances of Faye Dunaway, William Holden, Robert Duvall, or Ned Beatty? I mean, they're all pretty good across the board, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think they were all excellent
in everything. So
I think especially Faye Dunaway and Robert Duvall, like they're supposed to be network execs, and they're just awful people, and they do such a great job being awful people.
they're also both, and Ned Beatty also. They're all three of them are really going for it. They go really big. Ned Beatty comically so almost, but like Diana Christensen and Frank Hackett are like pretty straight down the line characters, but they go really big at times. Notably, Pauline Kael, the critic for the New Yorker, didn't like this movie, and her review was called "Hot Air," and in reference to how much every character just kind of yells and like gives big speeches, and like that didn't really work for her. I kind of like it personally, but I do see that criticism, I guess. But I don't know, I like it.
I think there is an element of it being a little in contrast with the style of the times. I feel like the 70s, as I said before, are very, in terms of filmmaking, a lot of films are very naturalistic. The acting is, even in response to previous eras where the acting was a little more theatrical, the acting in the 70s starts to be a little more grounded in reality, a little grittier. And this is very theatrical. So there could be an element of just the expectation going in.
I mean, honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I think this might be my Robert Duvall role of choice. Like, long, wide-spanning career and a lot of iconic performances, including The Godfather. But I don't know. I think I like him in this more than anything else. Maybe
nothing will ever beat Robert Duvall in Apocalypse Now for me.
That's true.
Wild.
Yeah, he's only in like one scene though, I guess.
Yeah, but it's so good.
Yeah, I think his character in Apocalypse Now probably shares more in common with Frank Hackett than with Tom Hagen. What's up, Grizz?
I think Robert Duvall and Faye Dunaway, both of their performances, while over the top and yelly, I think that they are over the top in ways that make sense for the archetype that they're playing. Whereas I don't feel like that's why that's why I feel so much like all the William Holden stuff feels so soap opera-y, because like everyone else is they're yelling, and then William Holden's kind of like
he's playing it normal.
He's playing it normal, and it's very weird.
Yeah. Actually, I guess when I say that Faye Dunaway's going for it, I don't mean she's yelly. I mean she's kind of like sporadic and all over the place and like kind of over the top and like how she gestures and says things, but like that does work for the character because she talks about ratings and numbers and profits and margins using a lot of terms I don't understand, but that's like all she talks about, and like that it gets her really excited and worked up, and that's why she's gesturing wildly and kind of circling the office like a crazy person. Like, but I think that works as her characterization, I guess.
Yeah.
Even if it is kind of a big performance, just because notably she even like talks those kind of numbers and ratings and stuff as they are getting into bed together, and obviously the line there, the dot they want you to connect is like that's getting her off, is talking about profits and ratings and that kind of stuff, and that's the only thing that gets her off.
Yeah.
I mean, she's kind of the, bad at life, good at her job kind of female character that we see way too many of, but I don't know. I still like her in this.
Yeah, well, and maybe in 1976, maybe there weren't so many bad at life, good at her job female characters.
I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe we're just viewing it with several more decades of that character showing up.
I guess I will say that. So she won Best Actress for this, and that's cool. She's great, but like the three iconic Faye Dunaway performances for me are Bonnie and Clyde, Chinatown, and this is number 3 of 3 for me. I like her a lot more in Chinatown and Bonnie and Clyde than I do in Network, but she's still good. I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. That's, like I said earlier, kind of like the legacy of the movie, the one thing people take away. Why do you guys think that's still like an iconic line 45 years later? What do you think that's speaking to at the time and still?
For me, it's because it's the beginning of him going completely off the deep end. But in that individual line, there's kind of a universal truth of it, just everyone can relate to the experience of feeling like they have no idea what's going on, feeling like they have no idea how to fix all the problems that they see constantly around them. And they just get fed up, and you have a moment where you just want to yell, and because there's nothing else you're able to do. And I think it's a universal feeling, and at the same time, I think it's a universal feeling that a lot of the angry media pundits of today exploit in order to kind of weaponize that feeling that people of helplessness and of just really not knowing what the hell is going on that people have. And so they and then they pump them with a bunch of fake information and make them do stuff, which is kind of what happens in the film.
I was just making sure. I wanted to say this at some point. Hugo's not going to get this reference, but I'm hoping Josh will. Whenever I see this scene where people are poking their heads out of the window and yelling,
it's as my mad money, as hell. I want it now.
That is all I can think of, Josh, is the J.G. Wentworth commercials. There's this lending company in the United States, J.G. Wentworth, and they had a whole ad campaign where people...
That was an homage to this scene.
It was an homage to the scene where people poke their heads out of the window and yell, "It's my money and I need it now!"
Talk about the corporate overlords of America.
Right? And that's all I can think about every time I see this scene. And the other thing, I guess shouldn't say it's all like the other thing I think about is how I would never do this. And I don't know anyone who would be watching the news and they say, "Go open your window and scream outside." I know literally no one who would actually be like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do that."
I mean, it's like the viral tweeting of 1976, basically.
Yeah, but people do the retweet because there's a barrier. You're behind your keyboard. Opening your window is like, look at this psychopath screaming out their window.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I prefer the good old days where people connected to each other by screaming at each other out their windows instead of interacting behind a screen. Hugo, I agree with you that I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take this anymore. It speaks to the feeling of powerlessness and the feeling of being overwhelmed by the grind and just being ground down by daily life, basically, and how it's easy to the marginalization of the individual is kind of talked about in this movie, and how corporations kind of run everything, and so the little guy is kind of no longer relevant, you could argue, and like that is grating, that feeling, if that's how you feel. And so if someone kind of points that out to you, get mad at that. That's what people are responding to. And I don't know. I think that it's harder to, it's easy to look at the 70s with a longer view of history and say, yeah, it was a pretty tumultuous time. And, like I said at the top, Vietnam and Watergate, like I understand why people were frustrated because it was a tumultuous time. Mm-hmm. Hard to say if our current time is as tumultuous as that. I don't think so. But again, we don't have the view of history to tell us that. But like people still feel ground down and frustrated and powerlessness. So that's probably why it still resonates. Grace, what do you got?
I was going to say, I do think that we're still as tumultuous now as then, just different tumult would be. Sure. I think tumult is a constant in all times. And right. But one thing I wanted to comment on was that, people like the people can relate. They're being told, you're marginalized and all that. But I appreciate the irony of a bunch of individuals being told they're being marginalized by corporations, and they're being told that by a corporation. And it's indicative of a willingness of the individual to forsake their individuality to be part of this group that like, oh, we're all marginalized? Yes, I will happily pretend to be marginalized with you because then I will not feel marginalized.
It's the little guy who is broke and lives in a trailer in the middle of America and votes for the billionaire because the billionaire says, I'm on your side. That's, it says, I know you're oppressed, I'm going to fight for you. That's what this movie is kind of getting to. And it being after Watergate, I think, is pretty perfect.
Yeah. So can we get to the spoiler section, talk about the ending of the movie?
Yeah, let's talk.
Yeah. Yes.
Cool. All right, so spoilers. Do you have the spoilers up?
I do.
So we kind of talked a lot about this already, but so Diana begins producing Howard Beale's show, which basically allows Howard to just rant as much as he wants, and then rants himself into fainting spells, apparently. And one of his rants is about the fact that a shell corporation for Saudi Arabians are buying CCA, which is the conglomerate that owns UBS. So, another layer of the corporate takeover is happening. And he says in his rant that shouldn't happen, that, the Saudis own too much of the country already, which is also kind of a... I don't know if that's prescient. I don't really know enough about how our economies run to comment on that, but
that these were also the years of the oil crisis, where
the oil crisis Saudis... happened a few years earlier before this, but they do kind of make mention of OPEC.
The oil crisis was kind of something that was in the conversation between 73 and 79.
Sure,
it was kind of a second big hit in 79, so it was still.
So because Howard Beale was talking about the Saudis buying CCA, he gets a talking to by the chairman of CCA, Arthur Jensen, played by Ned Beatty, and gives him that fire and brimstone speech about the primal forces of nature, the ebb and flow of money changing hands. The quote I pulled was, "We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business, Mr. Beale. It has been since man crawled out of the slime." Mm-hmm. Dark stuff, but probably true.
I think what's great about this is that it could be a speech out of RoboCop, and we would be like, "Oh yeah, it's satirical," but it's actually quite grounded in reality and how things work in the real world. So maybe we're in a corporate dystopia already.
Yes. So Howard internalizes this message from Arthur Jensen, and then in his next rant, he kind of talks about that and about the death of the individual. Mm-hmm. And because corporations run everything, and kind of the meaninglessness of everything in the world with corporate overlords, and because that's a pretty depressing rant, his ratings start to tank, and Diana and Frank Hackett begin talking about what to do about Howard Beale's tanking ratings, and apparently they can't just fire him because Arthur Jensen, the chairman of CCA, has taken a personal liking to him, and so he will not let them pull him off the air. So, Grizz, what do they do to fix his bad ratings?
They're going to kill him.
They kill him on the air. They assassinate him live on TV. I mentioned that Diana kind of gets into a business relationship with the Ecumenical Liberation Army. And so she has those guys shoot him on the air. And then the movie ends.
Yeah.
What do you think of the ending,
Hugo? I thought the ending... It does come out a little bit out of nowhere, that I will acknowledge, but I think it really completes the satirical nature of the film. I think Frank and Catherine are the two characters that, throughout the film, and Max are the three characters that are kind of the straight men or straight characters of. Obviously, she's a woman, but you know what I mean. They are playing it straight. They are characters that could be grounded in reality, and they are not full-on parody until that scene where they're planning the murder. When they're planning the murder, they're talking about, oh, we have to murder him, as if it was any other business report.
Like they were deciding what to order for lunch.
Yes. And the complete detachment that they have in this shows, essentially, it completes the satire of the film. It's showing, oh, these are just corporate people. All that matters is the bottom line. We do not care at all what the means are to get to that bottom line. And I thought it really worked. And I also thought that the death scene itself, with as soon as it happens, like it's not, the camera doesn't cut to black and everything falls into chaos. The camera zooms into his face in the same exact way that it did when he passed out at the end of his big rants. Mm-hmm. And the movie ends with that. So it's showing, oh, actually television as well is kind of giving into people's morbid curiosity and using that morbid curiosity to create ratings. And, you know, the whole subplot with the ECL is about her basically looking for snuff films to put on TV so that the audience will tune in. And I thought it was fantastic.
I think the ending does work just because like it's a punchline to the opening, which is the opening. It opens with Howard threatening to shoot himself on TV, and everyone's like aghast, like, oh my gosh,
you can't
terrible.
do that.
And then they shoot him on TV, so it's like a punchline to that opener. And also, Hugo, you were just kind of alluding to it. I think that the slow progression of bringing the ELA into the movie ELA. It makes just enough sense that the slow escalations, like it begins, like the first time we see Diana actually is she's going over footage from the ELA, because the ELA like robbed a bank with Patty Hearst, who they'd kidnapped. Yeah. And
just to be clear, it was not Patty Hearst in this movie. They reference the other group that did kidnap Patty Hearst. This was another
Patty Hearst
adjacent situation.
Sure. So, and the ELA like filmed themselves robbing the bank, and Diana is like very excited about the possibility of having footage of them robbing a bank, and like wants to build a series around that because she thinks people will like that. It's very interesting, dark, but again, kind of speaks to what's the moral responsibility of someone who puts stuff on TV. According to Diana, nothing but profits. But so that's how it starts. Is like she sees these people robbing a bank and wants to put it on TV. Then she eventually like meets with them and like brings them in to like take part in creating this show that she wants to create. She
meets with the Communist Party, and the woman from the Communist Party says, oh, we don't actually deal with those terrorists. But then it turns out they're actually friends and they know each other, obviously.
Yes.
Although there is conflict there. And I love how this film doesn't pull any punches on either side. Like, it's these corporate guys are the worst. But actually, these kind of fake communist guys are kind of the worst as well.
Yes.
And,
But again, that's a small escalation. Is like from seeing their footage and wanting to put it on the air to then like building a show around them and bringing them in. That's a small escalation. And then later, like as she's like getting into bed with Max, she's like kind of talking about the business and how like they're technically paying the ELA to like go commit more crimes and film it. So technically they are like an accessory to these crimes, and like they could be busted by the feds, but like she doesn't care because it's making money. So like that's just like. That's like just enough of a seed of like them doing illegal things alongside this army, but like being okay with it because it makes money. And that kind of the natural escalation of that is to have them commit an assassination live on TV and then just, you know, pretend like they didn't know about it or whatever. So I think that like the escalation there I think is well done and like well planted. And it starts from like not a sensible place, but at least a somewhat believable place. And then it ends with guys pulling out Uzis from a live studio television audience and shooting him. I did have though here that I do think it's only the ending is maybe a little bit forced just because the fact they can't fire him, I kind of don't buy that. The fact that like Ned Beatty took a liking to Howard Beale and therefore wouldn't let them fire him. Real quick, like I mentioned, like we weren't sure. I wasn't sure like whether he was doing that fire and brimstone speech to Howard Beale because that's how Howard Beale talks. He wants to relate to him on his level. Or if Ned Beatty is like actually kind of crazy in the same way and therefore he feels like kinship with Howard and therefore won't let them pull him off the air. Grizz, what do you think?
Well, so I do think it was because he talks about how I'm a salesperson. I can sell anything to anyone. And then, then he comes in and sells Howard in the way that
muddled in the primal
Yes.
forces of nature.
he sells Howard on the ideas that he wants Howard to espouse. So I really don't think that he's crazy himself. I think he's taking advantage of a crazy person, because and I think that they also mention when they're saying why they can't fire them. I think it's Diana that says we can't fire him because he'll be on ABC next week. And
That's earlier in the movie.
I guess it was earlier in the movie.
Like, his ratings are going very far down for the assassination conversation. And Frank Hackett says that Arthur Jensen said that, like, he doesn't care how low his ratings get. He wants to keep him on the air. And, he was inflexible on that point. As Frank
That's true,
Hackett
as he
said.
says that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I was still thinking about, well, he would just go get put on somewhere else, and now he's with a competitor. I guess, so in my head, I was like, there's lots of reasons that they can't fire him, in addition to Ned Beatty telling them you can't fire him. But that was, I can also see your point there. It's not 100% believable, but it's believable enough.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a live assassination on TV. Like, there's going to be some suspension of disbelief to make this work.
But to me, it's since the whole film is framed in this kind of absurd exaggeration of something that is very real, I think it works for me in that sense.
Yeah, and like you said, like we've said a number of times at this point, the scene where they discuss possibly assassinating him is very darkly funny, just in the contrast of like what they're talking about and how they're talking about it. Grizz, like you said, they're talking about what they're going to order for lunch in that kind of tone, but they're talking about killing somebody and committing capital crime. And Hugo, like you said, the way that shot is very cold and detached and kind of highlights that point. So that works for me. And then then they kill him and the movie ends.
I think the most unbelievable thing about that is two guys stand up with guns and shoot Howard, and the audience doesn't freak out.
We don't really see how the audience reacts.
Well, I mean,
the movie kind of
we
ends.
see them stand up, and they there's a beat where they've stood up and they've got their guns out before they start firing, because they have to give the cameras time to turn on the audience members, and they don't show any of the other audience members. Like, the person next to that guy should be like, something just spaz it out.
I think the point there is the film is also critiquing the audience for buying into all of this.
Very much
crap.
Sure.
Yes.
So the audience kind of, the show where they show crimes is a big ratings hit because people have that morbid curiosity to see anything for entertainment. And I think that there's kind of an element of that in the final scene as well. The audience is kind of hooked to what's going to happen.
And they're like, oh, this is part of the show.
Yeah.
Pauline Kael's review or negative review of Network was about how everyone gives big, long-winded speeches, but also because it is a critique of anyone who watches television, basically. And she thought that was a little mean.
Kind of is.
So, shame on all you sickos who watch television. And that's Network. Any final thoughts on Network before we rank it?
Not really.
I'll just say I really enjoyed talking about it more than I thought I would, because, like I said, I didn't absolutely love the movie, but I have really enjoyed this discussion of it.
Well, that's kind of the point of the podcast. So I'm glad you're enjoying our this thing called a podcast. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's an invention. Our films to remember ranking. I'm assuming this is going to go in the top 10, so I'll just list the top 10. From 1 to 10, we have Citizen Kane, Boogie Nights, The Thing, Your Name, The Departed, The Wind Rises, Sound of Metal, Incendie, It's a Wonderful Life, and 127 Hours.
Yeah.
I'm going to put this pretty high, personally. I don't know if I'm going to be in the minority, but
no,
I think
Hugo's going to be with you. I'm going to be the outlier here. It would not crack the top 10 for me.
You son of a bitch.
I mean, that's fine. You guys are going to outvote me on that. Go ahead.
I would not be mad about putting this at number 3, to be honest.
I was going to say 2 or 3 is probably where I would put it. So, do you guys want to put it number 3 behind Boogie Nights above The Thing? That's a pretty solid top 4 right there.
Yeah.
Citizen Kane, Boogie Nights, Network, and The Thing. That's a fucking weekend. Sorry for cursing.
I think I have some just minor little things, as I said, in this film that I think aren't as well put together as perhaps Boogie Nights is. At the same time, I do really gravitate towards the themes of the film. I like satire. I like satire about corporations and capitalism. So it's tough for me. But yeah, overall, I think I would put it at 3. So above The Thing and below Boogie Nights.
Sweet.
I'm fine with that.
Network.
Our top 10 is Citizen Kane, Boogie Nights, Network, The Thing, Your Name, The Departed, The Wind Rises, Sound of Metal, Incendie, and It's a Wonderful Life. When are we gonna re-rank these?
You
at any
ask
point?
this every week, and
Yeah,
the answer
I've
is
asked this like
so
once or twice.
this was-
not every week.
This was episode
But did you know
25?
that I like Jackie Brown more than
25,
most
yeah.
of these movies? I'm not sure if I said this before.
For example, you like Jackie Brown more than you like Rudy. Is that fair to say?
That could be something that I would say. Yes.
Let's say episode 30. Boom. Episode 30.
There you
We'll discuss a
Wipe
re-ranking of
it.
these.
So next week, I think we're gonna have another one that could crack the top 10. Personally, I hope the next one we do cracks the top 3, and that is. Are we doing Chinatown next week?
Yes,
we
we
are
are.
doing Chinatown. Yes.
All right, Chinatown. We're gonna stick with the 1970s, and this ended up not being that much shorter of an episode, but maybe next week will also be a bit of a shorter episode in that we'll just kind of spend it chopping up about the movie instead of having a main topic.
Yep.
We were kind of discussing off mic how like the conceit of the podcast is, discussing movies that are worth remembering. So let's talk about some older movies and not Sound of Metal, for example.
That came out
As much as I love Sound of Metal. Yeah.
I think
Remember
Sound of
that
Metal
film
will
that
be
came out
worth.
a week ago?
It'll be worth remembering,
Yeah.
Oh, certainly.
but
yeah.
Eventually.
no one's forgotten about it yet.
No one's seen it yet. No one's seen that movie, to be perfectly honest, which is a shame. They should.
Yeah. It's on Amazon
so yeah.
Prime. Watch it. If you're listening,
So
watch it.
watch Sound of Metal, listen to our episode on Sound of Metal, watch Chinatown, and then join us next week for Chinatown. Like, subscribe, comment, rate us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter at RTF_pod and at our respective handles, and tweet at GoodGameGrizz all your takes about how Network is great and how he's a loser for not liking it.
I like the movie. I don't love the movie. I like it. I don't love it. It's you keep making me out to be a villain here, Josh.
Don't tweet me in things at Grizz, but then actually do. But actually don't. I don't know. Do what your heart says.
Do it,
And
whatever
Tweet
feels
mean
right.
things at me. I like that. I enjoy that.
tweet me things at Hugo _Panay. And then we'll see you next week.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.